I'm Peggy Farren, and you are watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. My guest today is Bart Baldwin, and we're going to talk about seeing a photograph. Bart Baldwin has been a commercial and artistic photographer for 25 years. His style is kind of artistic, melded into photojournalism, and he does a lot of landscape photography as well. He has photographed over a dozen extreme home makeover shows, so we're going to talk about that in the show, and you're going to learn. It's going to be a fun show. After the show, remember, we put the show notes up on understandphotography.com. And also, if you go to our homepage, you'll see something that says, click here for freebies. We have quite a few little free things. We've got something about, travel photography, a little checklist for you. Right now, the popular thing is 30 unique and practical gifts for photographers. We also have, what do I need to know as a photographer? So it will give you a plan of action. So go onto our website and download one of the free things. And welcome, Bart.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks for playing our game here. So let's just go right into. Let me hear the short version of your life story as a photographer, because we found you because you do joint workshops with Bill Lee. Am I right?
Right. Bill's a friend of mine. Right.
And he was awesome. And I meant to look up the episode that he was on of the Understand Photography Show, but I forgot. So yeah. I will put that in the show notes.
No, Bill's a friend of mine. We've done several workshops together, and he's, besides being a great photographer, he's a really great guy. So
yeah, I got that feeling from him too. So tell us your short story of your life. The story of your life in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes. I'll try to stretch it out that long. Like most photographers, I started as a kid, loved taking photographs as a kid. I guess my first real steps in photography came back in the 80s when I took some college courses, and back in the days of film and dark rooms and all that kind of stuff. And I was really fairly involved with it back then. And then life happens. You have children. We had 4, so it took a while to get through the raising of children and things. But then around the end of the 1990s and the early 2000s, I got back into it fairly heavily, and the new way of doing photography with digital really melded my love of technology and my love of photography, and it was a natural fit. And I ended up getting some digital cameras and upgrading and that sort of thing. And I guess the first real good step that happened for me was I think it was around 2004, 2005. Canon, who I was shooting Canon gear at the time, they had their very first National Parks contest. And I entered a photograph of the Washington Monument shot from the Vietnam Memorial, and that took first place in the landscape division and got me a 5D. And that that was when that camera was brand spanking new.
The classic.
And the 24-105 lens, and that really helped.
That you got that too?
Yeah, it was a really nice contest.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. And that, with that little feather in my cap, I decided to, how can I parlay this into something? And I started doing workshops. And that's when a friend of mine, in addition to Bill Lee, another friend of mine, David Hartfield, and I started doing some workshops. And it's just sort of grown into a business that I started several years ago, doing normal commercial photography, doing portraits, events, not weddings. I don't do weddings. I can't stand the pressure. But pretty much everything else, I do architectural, that kind of stuff. And and then I did end up taking a job from one of my clients a couple of years ago, and that turned into a full-time job. And now I'm back into working on my own, and I'm doing some photography and a few other things. But I guess the thing with photography for me is that I love photography. I love when I can pass that information on to other people.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I really like about the workshops. That's what I get out of it. I really believe in the workshop environment, because people it's one thing to try and read to learn something or follow along on a video or that sort of thing, but to have somebody there to ask questions and to have them actually show you how to change the settings on your camera and that sort of thing, it really is. It helps people take a giant leap forward in their learning process. So that's
I completely agree, but I think you left out one thing is when they're in a workshop, they're away from their home, all those distractions and pressure of the day-to-day life. Because, we give classes, we have online classes and hands-on classes here, and people will take the classes and they learn in a nice systematic way. But when you go on a workshop, all those distractions are gone and you are just totally immersed in photography.
Yep.
And what a great way to learn. I mean, you really, and then, you can learn like in the class, f-stops and all that kind of stuff, but you really don't practice enough. But when you're on a workshop, you're out there constantly practicing, learning, practicing. I think I agree. It's a great environment.
Yeah,
and then you're usually seeing really beautiful scenery while you're at it.
Right. Yeah. You don't do a workshop and take people to see ugly things. You help them. You always go to pretty interesting places. Like we normally do Savannah, and this year we're doing Charleston. I do a fall colors in Colorado workshop. So yeah, you're taking people to places where, it's beautiful scenery, but they still have to learn the skills involved to capture that.
Wow. And you live in South Carolina, correct?
I do. I live in Columbia, outside of Columbia.
Columbia, okay. I've been there once for my brother's boot camp.
Yeah, Fort Jackson. Right.
Graduation, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so many years ago, but I just remember it was so hot.
Yep.
And all those poor guys, they were dropping, boom, fainting from the heat.
Yeah.
And you could feel everyone in the stands just going, please don't let my brother or son, whoever, be one of them who faints,
Right. I think the reason he made it through. It's so hot here, and it's the training process for those guys as well. So.
And they had all those clothes on, and oh, geez.
Yeah.
But thank God for our soldiers.
Another thing that I forgot to mention, I guess, along my photography career was unrelated to photography. I was a big fan of the Extreme Makeover the home edition.
Oh yeah.
And I tried for years to try and figure out how to volunteer to be, one of the blue shirts walking around on that show and just volunteering. One thing led to another. The company that I worked for ended up acquiring another company that supplied equipment to the jobs. And I finagled my way around and made contacts, and I ended up being able to shoot behind the scenes starting off for the builders, and then ended up working with the production company to shoot behind the scenes photographs on about 13 of those episodes. And that was, it was awesome. It was very, very much fun.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. So you already liked it, but
Yeah,
you never made an official inquiry to the TV show itself, right? Your company got the gig first.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The way that they worked it was everything was kept really, really secret about where they were doing the project. So it was such a successful show that whenever they would go to a town and they would say, okay, we're going to be doing a project somewhere in this area, we need volunteers. Boom, they'd have 1,000 volunteers like that. It's no big deal.
So if you blinked your eyes, you missed the casting call.
Yeah. So I never could work my way in that way. But when the company acquired the other company that had that contract, well, I started making phone calls and putting the word out that I wanted to go, and managed to get on one or two of those behind the scenes, just looking around,
But were you volunteering?
No,
or were they paying you?
I just made contacts and actually got a hold of the location manager for the production company. And he said, yeah, sure, come on, I'll show you around. So I came in and they showed me around, and it was what you saw on TV was just the production side, and what you didn't see was the 4 or 5 blocks of space that this show takes up and the thousands of people that it really did take to build these houses. in such a short period of time. So I went back to the company. I said, hey, let's do this. Why don't we, they send the family away while they're building the house, and they only get to see the show. They don't really know what it takes to build the house. So why don't you let me go spend a week at one of these, take photographs of all the stuff that it takes to build this house. We'll put together an album and give it to the family under the company's name. And they said, yeah, sure, that sounds like a good idea. So we did that. And
then you actually got paid to do that then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was actually being on the clock, I guess you would say. I was on the clock for the company doing that.
Okay.
And then when we made the album, I went around. I found a wonderful, wonderful company this was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. 803 Labs, Tony at 803 Labs. I got a hold of him and I was asking, hey, I got a tiny little bitty budget to produce this album. And I wanted to know if maybe you could print some 8x10s for me that I could put in the album, and we're just going to give it to the family. And he said, well, let me show you what we do. And he takes me over to this wedding album that is laid out. I mean, it's beautiful. It's got background images and it's got, grids of photographs. And I was like, man, that's beautiful, but it looks expensive.
Yeah.
And I had like a $500 budget. I mean, it was nothing I really didn't have much of a budget. And Tony said, well, what you do is you go take the photographs. You do what you do, bring me the photographs, and we'll lay out the album and do it for you.
Wow.
I said, how much? And he said, no. If we can just put our little website down at the bottom for like the first 3 or 4 pages. I was like, dude, wow. And they did such a wonderful job and because they were also local, they did like 80% of the album. And then when we brought the family home, or before we brought the family home, I went around and took the album that was finished up to that point, and I had Ty and all the guys autograph it. The builder autographed it, and everybody that I could find that was a volunteer that their photograph was in there, we had them sign it. And so, I mean, it was filled with, it was awesome. It was really cool. It was filled with autographs of all the volunteers and the cast and the crew and all this kind of stuff. And then when the family came home, we took photographs of the reveal, and then the guys at 803 Labs finished up the album. We also gave them the family, a camera that they were able to take with them on vacation. So we dedicated a couple of pages of the album with their family photographs from their vacation in the middle of the build. And then when the builder saw the album, the finished product, he thought it was great. He bought a few of them himself. And it just sort of snowballed. I ended up being called in by him to go do the season finale that year in New Orleans, where they brought in a bunch of builders after Katrina to do a couple of projects. And, he took the album that we had made and showed it to the builders, and they said, yeah, that's fine, go ahead. So I did that, and that just sort of, snowballed into, well, I did another one and did another one. And I guess the thing that really I consider to be a really huge success is that at the end of the show, the run of the show, they did a big, huge series finale in, I'm going blank here, in Joplin, Missouri, where the tornadoes had gone through, and they literally did 7 houses in that period in 7 days.
Wow.
The production company actually hired me to come in and do the ending, the behind the scenes photos for the last show. So that was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. What a great experience. Now, when you went with the production company, did your builder company let you just take a week off or however long it takes?
I burned up all of my vacation for about 4 years. And there may have even been a week. There may have been a week in there that I took off without pay, just to go do it. I mean, it was very rewarding. I mean, there were benefits that happened because of it, but when you got to see people's photographs, they saw their photograph in the album that was going to be given to the family. There was a lot of tears, a lot of.
Oh, you're making me all teary just listening to the story. I love photo albums because you'll actually look at a photo album with this day and age with everything digital. Mm-hmm. People just, if they're not on Facebook, they're never going to look at them again, which is a shame, or they're going to lose them. They're not backed up. So I love photo albums, and especially you can tell the story in an album. That's so sweet. So let's talk about what our topic today is. What? Seeing what was our title? I already forgot. Seeing
Seeing photography. I mean, that's
seeing seeing photography. Now, what do you mean by that?
well, I mean, the obvious is just looking at photographs, but I mean, it really is kind of a multi-step or a multi-meaning phrase to see photography.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, first thing I teach people in my workshops is you really need, if you want to get great at photography, then you need to do a lot of looking at photographs and not just your stuff. I mean, it's always cool to take photographs and enjoy the things that you've produced, but the education process, teaching yourself photography, really requires that you become, for lack of better terms, an expert at looking at photographs.
Okay.
And so I highly recommend to people to find great photography in not just the area that you're interested in, but in all aspects. Find great photographs and look at them because, well, first of all, it's going to impact you in the long run. The more you look, sort of like reading. People
Hmm.
that are readers have better vocabulary because they read more words. They have better recall. They can express themselves a little bit better. Studies show all this stuff. Well, the same thing with photography is, excuse me, is that the more you look at photographs, the more familiar you become, even subconsciously, with the things that you're looking at, and eventually you learn how to incorporate that into your own photography.
Okay, so what do we it's interesting that you say this because the beginning of my lighting class, it's just 10 slides of me saying, where is the light coming from? Where
Right,
is the light coming from?
right,
You know,
right.
because I want them to understand you have to be able to see the light if you
Hmm.
want to be good with lighting.
Right,
So
absolutely.
so that's what I'm teaching in my class. What do you look when you say look at this picture, what are they looking for?
Well, it's a bunch of things. Okay, when you're becoming a student of photographs, when you're teaching yourself to look at photographs, you're looking at, the first thing I like to have people do is, okay, when you open up a book or you open up a magazine and you're looking at photographs, feel that feeling when you first see it. What does it do to you? Maybe nothing.
Like identify your emotion, is that what you're trying to
Yeah,
say?
exactly. Yeah, I
Like,
mean, I like
oh,
it.
look at that cute baby, I'm feeling all gushy inside, or look at that animal eating
Yeah,
another animal, that's
right,
just gross, and
right. Well, I mean,
I'm
so when you
glad
look
I'm
at
glad my meat is packaged.
yeah, no, exactly. So when you look at a photograph, the first thing you want to do is you look at it and you go, okay, I like it. I don't like it. I
Okay.
like it, but, or I wish this, So you're looking at the photograph to get your feeling for it. And then you start asking yourself, why? Why do I like it? What about it do I like? What about it do I not like? What do I wish I saw differently? Which is always a fun thing when you're doing contests and you enter a photograph in a contest. Inevitably, a judge is going to go, well, if you'd have just stepped 3 steps to the left, and taken it from that position, and I'm thinking, yeah, and I'd have fallen off the cliff while I'd have been just 3 steps over. So,
It's
but
funny you say that because as a judge, I say that all the time, but I
yeah,
always add the thing that you just said. I said, "Oh, too bad you couldn't have stepped 3 steps over, but I know you probably would have fallen into a cliff, or
yeah,
something."
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
I know you don't know the story on why they didn't, because there's probably a reason.
Right. But as you're looking at the photograph, you want to look at all of these things. So you're teaching yourself, what is it about the photograph, the image that I like? What is it that I
Okay.
don't like? And then the things that you're going to, then you start looking at it from more of a technical aspect, the more you learn photography. For example, a really good friend of mine bought me a book, a photography book, and we literally went through this book page by page for almost 2 hours, standing in my kitchen, just looking at it. We would flip the page and we'd start talking about that image and talking about what can you derive from looking at this photograph. You
Okay.
can tell, and a lot of times you can tell, well, it's a long exposure because I see star trails, or the clouds are blurred, or, you know, that sort of thing. Or it was a very small aperture because everything is in focus, or it's a large aperture because there's a really shallow depth of field.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that you can start looking at or start pulling out of images And then once you can start making those connections between the technical aspect and what you're seeing, then that translates over into, as you start taking photographs, you start learning how to incorporate those things into your photography.
Okay.
You know,
I
so
like that. I like
yeah.
that. So you're gonna identify, first thing is the feeling that it gives you, and
Hmm.
then why. Why do I like this or why do I not like this? Then you're gonna try to determine the camera settings. Then you're gonna determine where the light's coming from. I added
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a very huge fan of Brooks Jensen, who is the editor in chief of Lenswork magazine.
Okay.
It is, in my opinion, one of the best photography magazines out there.
What's it
Um,
called again?
Lenswork. I actually have a copy. Let's see
Lens
what it is.
work. Okay.
Lenswork. Okay,
All
so
right.
this
We'll
this
put
is one
that
of
in the
them.
show notes.
Yeah, I highly, highly recommend that magazine. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, so I'm not getting anything out of it. But I take these books with me on every workshop that I go to, and I show it to folks because it's not only is it really great fine art photography, but it's very well printed. You could literally take just about any page out of that magazine, put it in a frame, and hang it on your wall, and people would go, ooh, ah. So it's a really good one, but it's not the only one out there. But I do recommend that you find some really, really high quality photography and make a habit of going through it on a regular basis and
Studying
just
it.
looking at a lot of photographs.
I really like the idea of doing it with a friend like you did.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a better idea because your friend is going to have a different eye than you are
Hmm.
and maybe point out different things that you don't see, or you're going to vice versa. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah, it was a wonderful exercise. We've done it more than once, so yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and for the listeners, sometimes especially nature photographers tend to be kind of solitary people. It's such a good idea to find a photo buddy, or just at least once in a while go with the camera club or somebody on a photo walk so that you're not alone. It'll really help. Or go on a workshop, right? That's
Absolutely,
another
absolutely.
idea. You meet
And it,
people and you really learn from others.
and what's interesting is we mentioned Bill Lee, I believe. Um, he's um, he is primarily a nature photographer. He takes tons and tons of photos of bears. He loves black bears and all kinds of bears. He does primarily nothing but nature. Um,
Hmm.
but he came and did a workshop with us in Charleston, South Carolina, where it was a very urban workshop. We walked around the city and we did do some nature stuff. We went to some of the bird sanctuaries and that sort of thing. But he absolutely loved it because it was so completely out of his norm,
Yeah.
you know. And so I think that there's a lot to be gained by, and you mentioned nature photographers. Well, look at some street photography, completely different from nature, but you're going to see things that you're going to learn from looking at that photograph. So,
That's a great point.
yep.
What else? What else can we look at? What else can we look for while we're looking? And where do you think, like magazines and with good photography, that's the best place to find the photography to look at?
I like magazines. I mean, there's great places online to get some great photography, but to me, I like the tangibility of a nice print. If you can find something that's printed well and looking at it, because there's different qualities in looking at a print versus looking at it on your screen.
I totally
Um,
agree.
so I do, but there's nothing wrong with finding great sites online and looking through photography there. The one thing that I always caution people about when you get involved with online is anytime comments are involved, you've got to take that with a grain of salt.
You mean if they
Because
comment on your picture?
on your picture, or you're reading the comments that other people are making on the photograph that you're looking
Oh,
at, because there's I don't even get into the psychology that happens online, but there's a lot of meanness that goes on, a lot
yeah,
of
that's for sure.
uneducated meanness. There's a lot of
I,
educated meanness. People learn a few rules about photography, and then if an image breaks it, then they go into blast that it's not meeting the rule of thirds, or it's not meeting this rule or that rule. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's a great photograph or photograph. So I just say take
yeah.
comments online with a really big grain of salt.
Okay, good point. Good
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah.
You have both educated and uneducated people making comments too, which
Hmm.
was one of the reasons that I quit our professional guild in this area because they just started having critique sessions and anybody could critique, and they were all
Yeah.
the people who just joined yesterday, and they were the people who hadn't even taken a photography class yet, but they started a business. And I was like, I don't think this is what we should be doing. I think
Well,
people need to have an educated eye. And, it depends on what you want to do with it, because something could, you know, go against every composition rule there is and still be a fabulous picture that you want to hang on your wall. Because if you're just going
absolutely.
to have it for yourself, who cares what the rules are?
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes learning the rules ruins pictures for you too.
Well, it
'Cause
can.
it's
Very
like,
well
oh,
can.
I didn't know that rule. Now I see the horizon through his head and it's bothering me.
Yeah. Well, here's another sort of little nugget of wisdom that I try to throw out there that somebody taught me a long time ago, and that is before you give anybody the power of influencing your thoughts, you need to find out whether or not they should have that power. So when it comes to photography, before you listen to anybody give you any advice on your photographs, go look at theirs. If you can respect their work, then listen to what they have to say. If you don't respect their work, then they're just next, move on to the next person. Seek out those
Oh,
people that you respect their opinion or their work and get their opinion. That's what's going to matter.
great advice. All right, so let's talk about how do you go? So you've studied this picture. Is there anything else that we can talk about that?
No, I mean that's the
Okay,
biggest
so
thing to me is just educate yourself on photographs themselves. At least
and
that's
so
that
how do I
aspect of it.
bring that into the field? Okay, so now I'm going into the field. Do you have like a routine for finding the best composition positions when you go to a new location? What do you do?
No, for me, it's very much about. I mean, you start to, at least for me, the way that it has worked is that the more and more I've become familiar with photographs and great photography, then the more and more I start seeing photographs wherever I go. You start,
Oh.
yeah, so you start being able to pick out the photograph in the scene. I wish I had some photographs. Maybe I'll dig them up and them to you, and maybe you can put them in the show notes or whatever after the show. I did a thing with a local camera club, which I also believe is a great way to learn photographs. If you're not involved with a local club, go find one right now and get it. I mean, for the people that are listening, go find a local club and get involved. Um, and because they're also, I mean, rubbing shoulders with other people that have the same interest is another great way to learn photography.
Yeah,
But anyhow,
totally agree.
for a local club, we were doing a presentation on seeing photographs. So this other aspect that we're now talking about with regards to that is you begin to see photographs in everything, everywhere that you go. Your mind sort of becomes a camera. And then I took some photographs during the series of the image that I saw, a nice close up of this zigzag in a field of wheat going
Okay.
up the hill. It made a little zigzag. And then I took a wider shot and it showed the junkyard sitting over here and the trailer with the cars sitting over here. So the point is that in this scene, there's a photograph. And,
Okay.
so you
And
begin
you
to see that image within the greater realm of what you're looking at.
So when you take somebody out on a workshop, let's say you took them to that junkyard, how do you help them see the picture? What if I go and I say, I don't see anything to take a picture of here, Bart. What should I do?
Well,
How
and
how how can you help me?
I think that is the advantage of going on a workshop with people, especially people that are experienced with where you've been, or they just have a knack for composition. Because that's in a workshop, that's really where it's helpful because they say, well, let's do this. Take your camera and let's set it up and let's look at just this. So they will help guide you in that process. I mean, that's what I do on my workshops.
When you
Um,
say let's just look at just this, what does that mean? You mean
uh,
narrowing in tight on things, or
yeah, it's well, I mean, that's the interesting thing about photography is that you've got wide angle lenses, you've got telephoto lenses, you've got macro lenses. The gamut of things that you can see at any given time is just super crazy. wide. So you have to learn to, yes, narrow it down to an aspect that becomes interesting to look at or photograph. Sometimes it doesn't even, it works great, sometimes it doesn't work at all. It just becomes a matter of seeing the photograph within your realm. And I think that this is where looking at a lot of photographs starts to play, because when you're looking at a scene, you might go, oh, well, if I zoomed in on that from out here, I'm going to eliminate all this junk in the background. Or maybe if I were to shoot this small object up close with a wide angle, it's going to distort it a little bit, and that'll give it this other look that I've seen in some photographs before. So you start combining your knowledge from what you've seen with what you can get in the field. So it really is a matter of, you have to train your mind to start seeing photographs in the scene that you're looking at. I mean, it's hard to verbalize how to do it, I guess.
But I understand what you're saying, because I know when we do workshops, we say things like you did, just very specifically, because most of us, including me, I mean, I'm better now because I've been doing this for a long time, but when somebody would say, oh, just, look for a scene, walk around, which is helpful, but I really don't. I need like really concrete suggestions. I need somebody to say, well, zoom in on that, and you can compress the picture so everything will look closer together. Or tilt your camera. I need like a list of things to try. And even now I have all this knowledge, and I still don't think of all these things. It's nice.
Yeah.
You could make a little checklist of different things you could try, like go in your yard and say, okay, how many different ways can I photograph this corner of my yard? Try, like you said, try the different lens, tilt the camera, whatever, walk around from different angles, different times of day, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I took those college classes way back in the early days of my photography career, one of the very first things that they had us do was to load our camera up with a roll of film, and to leave the classroom where we were at the college we were at, and to not go more than 50 yards from the classroom, and to take photographs and use up the whole roll of film. So that was the first lesson, is that you're going to change how you take photographs. A lot of people think you're going to be able to take your camera and go set it up, and you're going to get to this point in knowledge to where you can take your camera and set it up in any given scene and take the perfect photograph. And that's generally not the way that it works. Even for great photographers, most of them will go and they'll set the camera up and they'll take this photograph, and then they'll change the settings and they'll take that photograph, and then they'll put it into landscape mode and they'll take that photograph, and they'll try a bunch of different things. So, and you're right too. The other thing is take it from different angles and take it at different times of the day under different lighting conditions. So yeah, I mean, it's you and
different lenses, and all these different things you could do.
Which is another thing too that's interesting about if you go on a workshop or you're involved with an outing with a group, is you'll have 7 or 8 people lined up, all their cameras on a tripod, and they'll all be taking pictures of roughly the same thing, but then review the photographs. And you'll find out that a lot of times it's wildly different what this person took versus what that person took. And that's an education experience in and of itself too.
Boy, do I agree with that. That's why I think you really need to get out there with other people, because then you're like, oh, in fact, I have a story about that. And people who have listened to the podcast for a long time have probably heard this story, because Joe Fitzpatrick, who works here, he has this fabulous picture of this fishing shack in Pine Island Sound. And I was like, oh, I would love to go photograph that. I just love this picture so much. It's a red fishing shack, and it's got the long dock, and it's such a cool picture. So finally, our friend Marcel says, hey, let's go rent a boat. We'll go out there. And we did. And I got a very similar picture to Joe's. We were out there for a long time. And then Marcel's picture was so cool. He had all the birds in the foreground, and he used a different lens, and he compressed the dock so that it looked really close to the red. Oh,
Yeah.
So now I'm jealous about that. But
Yeah.
it was something that I didn't see, I didn't think of, and so
Hmm.
next time I will be looking for that. Next time I see anything similar to that, I got to remember. Oh, look at the birds in the foreground, and
Yeah.
I did go back again. I didn't get a picture like Marcel's, but I did get a couple of really cool pictures that, because of my experience with Marcel's picture coming out so good,
Right.
I had a different mindset when I was taking the pictures.
You learned. You
So
through his photography, you learned. By looking at his
yeah.
book. So yep, yeah. We've got to actually my group of friends. We have a little phrase that we use that when somebody does that to us by taking this wonderful photograph, you suck.
I
Because you got something I
know.
didn't get. It says, man, you suck.
I agree.
So how good our friends' photographs is the degree of how badly they suck.
I totally agree with that, man. It's like, damn, I didn't see that. That got it.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So like now, so you have a particular style, would you
Oh my
say?
goodness. I don't know. I mean, I think that one of the things about being in love with photography and doing a lot of looking at a lot of different types of photography is it broadens your spectrum. At least
Mm.
it did for me. I mean, I love shooting landscapes. Um, I'm kind of known in our group for shooting old barns, black and white
Oh,
old
okay.
barns. But at the same time, I love shooting air shows. I love the fighter jets when they fly by fast and you get the vapor coming off the wings, which is completely different than an old barn, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so I have a lot of different things that I like to shoot. I think overall, something that runs through most of my photography is a sort of a sense of nostalgia.
Okay.
I have noticed that when you look through a lot of my photographs, it's kind of looking like looking back on yesteryear.
Oh,
So I
even the
would
air
say
shows?
not so much the air shows though.
Now, do
No.
you have a specific, because you said that you're really into post-processing, but your
Mhm.
pictures don't look like heavily processed to me, unless
Thank you.
I was missing some of them. Is there, I mean, do you feel like you could achieve your look through processing or?
Well, some of it, yes. Like my old barns. There's definitely a look to my old barns. I've got a process that I developed over many years to where it's got a sort of a unique look, through the processing.
But what kind of, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you
It's,
said.
it's unique. It's a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit unique to the process. It's a little high key. It's a little bit soft
Oh,
diffusion. There's a lot of things thrown in there. I believe in mixing it up a lot.
okay.
So there's sort of a recipe involved with getting it to a certain look. And a lot of my nostalgia things have kind of that processing. But I do believe in post processing. A lot of people, um, especially a lot of the online critics, kind of poo-poo the idea of post processing. It's like you got to
Yeah,
get it good in the camera. If you can't get it good in the camera, then you're not a photographer. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that personally. I think that yes, you need to do as good a job as you possibly can getting that photograph captured in the field. Okay.
I
But
agree.
in my opinion, you're about halfway done, maybe halfway done.
Yeah.
Truly great photography happens in post processing.
I
Okay.
think I go both ways because I agree you have to have really, really know what you're doing. I think the people who are really criticizing, there's so many people who want to fix a picture rather than learn how to take a picture. So
Mhm.
yes, you need to learn what you're doing, take a good picture, but why wouldn't you improve it if you could?
Well, I think that one of the interesting things that I saw at some point or fairly early in my career was the processing notes, the darkroom notes for Ansel Adams, some
Oh,
of
I
his more
think I've seen
iconic,
that.
some of his more iconic photographs. And if you see those notes, then you'll realize that it was not even close to what was captured in the field. Okay,
Yeah,
it was a
yeah,
created image in post processing. His just
right.
happens to be in the darkroom, ours happens to be on the computer. But
Are there
yeah,
any special techniques that you just like really like the look of that you do? And do you use Lightroom or Photoshop or both or?
I use primarily Lightroom, and the Nick collection that
Okay.
Dilto purchased Nick's a little while ago and saved it
Wow.
from destruction.
Yeah. What is it, like $50 now to
Yeah, it's
buy?
about 50 or 65 or something like that, and it is so worth it. I mean, again, I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get anything out of it. But it really, truly changed my photography when I discovered the Nick collection.
Now, do you
And
have special ones, special Nick filters that you like, or
well, I use the color effects all the time. Any image that
like
I'm going,
anything within the color effects that you like the best, or?
um, it's kind of a combination. I'm almost always, you got to go back and dust off the memory now of how do I do this. When I take it into the color effects, almost always I use color contrast. I
Okay.
use that. Um, I use a lot of times I'll use the reflector effect.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
okay, but the key to it is and a lot of people, this is where really where training and a lot of experimentation comes in, is that the key to post processing is so that when you're done, people, I mean, one of the best compliments you've given so far is that you couldn't really tell that they were heavily post processed my
Right.
images.
Right.
And that's the goal, is that when someone looks at your image, they don't go, oh, that's heavily processed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, and especially when you get into post processing it, and like with color effects or the Nick collection, it's easy to overdo it. Everything needs to be done in small, tiny increments and applied in specific ways, so that when you're done with it, it doesn't look over processed. So
Right.
sorry about the dog. We've got family this weekend.
It's a busy week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what were we talking about? Post
Post
processing.
processing, yeah.
Well, some people have a very artistic, look, like textures, and I like that too. I mean, I'm not a purist by any way,
Hmm.
shape, or form. I mean, I really like the weird distorted stuff as well as the,
Hmm.
this just looks like a photograph. And of course, I'm still a working portrait photographer too. So without Photoshop, I mean, I just did a perfect little baby, but he had the baby acne, you know?
Yep, yep.
I took all that
Well,
out, man.
again, I think that no matter what you shoot, there's a place for post processing. Now, how far you go with it is really up to you. You
And that's
know.
the thing. I mean, as we're, one of the things that I feel really encouraged about, because we were talking before we started recording about, the photography business is a tough business nowadays. It's very saturated with everybody wants to be a photographer, and they're just driving the prices down. Um, but what is gaining acceptability, I guess is a word that I could use, is photography as fine art.
Yeah.
When I first started, my quick story is I kind of went broke in 2009 because I was just mostly doing children's photography, and that business was one of the first to go because every young mom with a camera became a baby photographer, and they didn't charge it. At that time, they didn't charge any money at all. They were just building their portfolios. So I lost my business, man,
Yep.
fast. So I
Yep.
started doing event photography, and my first job was at the Naples Art Association, and they really poo-pooed photography. Well, now they've got one of the big national contests. It's called Camera USA every year. It's a $5,000 prize, and
Hmm.
they have it's like mostly photography now, and it's the post-processing. Some of them are go crazy, and some of them, are purists where they just take the pictures, and it's all art. I mean, we're
Yeah.
artists, so we
Hmm.
could do whatever we want within
That's right.
reason.
Within reason. Unless you're a photojournalist, that's one area where they got what you shoot is what you get. But outside of that,
Yeah,
I
that's true.
completely
You're not even allowed to, take a piece of trash out of the
install.
picture. They're very
Yeah,
picky.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So you're mostly doing workshops now, right? That's your primary focus in photography?
In photography, yeah, it's workshops.
And it's mostly urban workshops or what?
No, I mean
Because you said Savannah and
yeah,
Charleston.
do those two, and then when we do the Colorado Fall Colors every year,
Oh, well,
which
that's
is
not
about
urban.
as far
That's
from urban as you can get. Yeah, it's pretty flat
yeah.
there.
So is it landscape photography that you're doing in college? So you're not a bird photographer
No,
or wildlife.
I've got several friends that are really into bird photography, and that's a whole different group of people. I
That's
mean,
really, it's a very unique skill, and one of the harder skills to master is the bird photography, I think. But of
yeah,
course, here in Florida, although I would think it'd be the same thing in South Carolina because you get all the beautiful birds too.
we got a bunch.
It's big time here, man. Everybody wants to do the birds.
Yep, yep. A lot of my friends travel a lot to Florida. Yeah, just
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
having fun.
you're in the Everglades in January, February, March, even April. There are just, it's unbelievable, all the beautiful birds. I remember when I first moved to Florida, I was so amazed at all the birds and all the houseplants that grew outside.
Yeah, yep, yep.
All right. Are there any other, what do you say about post-processing? What do you think somebody, if they don't know anything about post-processing, where do they start?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, photography is such an interesting art form. You know, it's one of those where if you like learning, you like expanding, and you like growing, it is the art for you because there is so much to learn.
You never
Um,
learn everything.
no, I mean, I've recently started doing it this way. It's like I talk about photography being, and this sounds really bad, but it's not what I meant. It's mall art. And by what I mean by that is that, you know, a lot of art, like painting, it might be a department store because you've got different types of painting. You've got oils and you've got pastels and you've got watercolor. You know, so you got all these different departments, but you're learning to paint. You have canvas, or maybe you're putting it on wood. You've got some selection, but there's a finite amount of things that you have to learn. A skill which I'll never have. I'm not a good painter. I'm not putting people down. I'm just saying that it's like a department store, right? Well,
Okay.
with photography, it's like a flipping mall. I mean, you've got to learn your the technical aspects of your camera. Then you got, okay, throw a different lens on. Then you've got aperture, and you've got shutter speeds and all of that stuff. You've got the different types of photography, and then you throw in the whole other side of the mall is post processing, where you've got different uh, applications that you can use, plugins, techniques, all of these things. So there's a lot of things to learn. That's the good news and the bad news. The thing is that you do have to learn it, and it's very difficult to learn on your own. So I truly, truly do recommend that people go to workshops. I know that at some of the big photography conventions, they will have classes or workshops within the conventions. Some of these are open to the general public, or maybe for a small fee, you can go take Scott Kelby's class on Lightroom or something like that. Completely recommend that kind of stuff because if you're really,
Or understand photography's class on Lightroom.
yeah, or that, yeah. But find a way, get somebody to train you up to give you the basic foundations because it's a long process. I remember somebody a long time ago telling me it's going to be 20 years before you're good at photography. I was like,
Yeah,
20 years? I don't want to wait 20 years. No, it took a while. You know,
yeah.
it takes a while to learn everything there is to learn, but
Well,
you know,
that's what I don't, one of the things, it took me, in my opinion, way too long to learn photography. So when I started putting together the classes, it's like I'm going to have systematic way to learn the important things a little at a time. So that's what
Mhm.
our classes are. You know, you're never going to learn everything, but you're not going to just be like trying to piecemeal your education, which is what I did. Even though I took formal classes, I took a year-long program, and I was going to say internet program, but it wasn't at the time. It was videos.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
old. But it was a formal program, but it was still, I didn't learn that much in that program. It was a lot of technical things that I didn't even need to know.
Yeah.
So that's
And
what,
that's where I think hands-on with somebody else is really the way to go
well,
because, yeah,
that's all of my classes were hands-on except for that, though. I used
really,
to budget $7,000 a year for training. And
wow.
it was just, it's still, unless you have a systemized way to learn, it's really hard. So that's why I have one of the, they call it a lead magnet, but basically you give something away for free in exchange for somebody signing up for your mailing list, right? And
Right.
one of
Yep.
the things that we give away is called What You Need to Know for a Solid
Mhm.
Photography Education. because just knowing that you get it for free, it's on our
Mhm.
website under freebies, but just knowing what you're supposed to learn, even if you don't take our classes, you're still going to have at least a roadmap because there is so much to learn, as you said.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot to learn, and I think that it's really important for people to understand. You do need to learn the basics. Go shoot. If nothing else, just go shoot, because you do need to learn your camera. The way I like to equate it for people, back to the basics, at least as far as the gear is concerned, is that it's very much like a fighter pilot in the military. When it comes down to them doing their job, they have flown that airplane so much that they don't have to think, I want to go right. What do I need to do to go right? It's just
Right.
instinctual. They move the plane. It's an extension of who they are. Same thing with our camera. You need to shoot enough so that I need to reduce my aperture. You're not thinking about how do I get to that setting or how do I do this. That becomes natural. And the only way that happens is to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. Get out there
And
and
how do
practice.
do you have any suggestions on how to get yourself to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot? What if you're busy? I'm busy. How am I going to squeeze that in?
It's tough. I mean, I guess when it comes to educating yourself with photography, there is a bit of discipline that's required, self-discipline. You have to commit and you have to be a little bit disciplined so that you can follow through with, what's required. The nice thing is it doesn't really take a long time to shoot every day. I mean, it's a challenge, but when it really comes down to it, even if you just want to go to your backyard and shoot some macro of some blades of grass, you're learning
Mm,
something.
good
Okay.
point.
And
Just say, hey, 20 minutes a day. You could even,
yeah. And I think the biggest challenge for most people is having their camera with them. So have your camera with you.
yeah.
You know?
That is it. That actually, believe it or not, that's my challenge too, because
Yeah.
when I'm not working, I'm in there charging batteries and whatever. So
Yep. Yep.
I
Yep.
don't keep it
So
with me.
so
Got your cell phone though, and you can do a lot with a cell phone.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, somebody said, what's the best camera? And it's like, well, the one I've got, that's the best camera. The one you've got with you. So if you've only got your cell phone, well, learn it. And they make great photographs. I think they're part of the problem with what's wrong with the photography business these days is that phone cameras have gotten so good, especially with the new portrait modes and this mode and that mode, that people are using their cell phones to take photographs, and a lot of times they're really great photographs. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and it can be a bit of a challenge for professionals to compete with something that's that easy and that cheap and that basically free.
I have a story about that too. This summer we went to Acadia National Park, four of us did, and one of the photographers was Joe Fitzpatrick, the guy who works here, and he he climbed down on these dangerous slippery rocks and he stood down there taking pictures of this lighthouse for at least an hour. And so he comes and it was really dangerous, so most people didn't go down that far. So he come and it was cold. So if you fell in that water, not only would you hit your head and die, but you'd freeze to death in the same time. So and it was summer. But anyway, he comes back and he shows us this amazing picture on the phone. And he's like, God, I hope some of my real pictures came out this good.
That's funny. Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen them yet either, come to think of it.
Uh-oh, maybe they weren't. Maybe the phone did the best job.
So, all right. So, my closing question to you is, what do you mean when you say no one can teach you to be a great photographer except you?
Oh, I get asked that one a lot because I do firmly believe in that. And that really has come from the experience of watching other people learn photography. And there are a lot of people that will take a class, they'll take a workshop, they'll go to a workshop, and they want to learn photography, but they expect you to impart knowledge to them, and they can just sit back and absorb it. And that's just not the way that it works. Again, because there's so much to learn, you have to invest in your own learning, your own education. Yes, other people are going to give you information. You're paying people to take a workshop with them, right? You expect them to educate you. But what I mean by only you can teach yourself is that you have to invest in learning yourself. Seek out the knowledge. Don't just sit back and expect somebody to impart that knowledge on you. You got to look it out. You got to seek it out. You got to search for it and to pull that information in. And when somebody is giving you information, you got to bring it in. You got to take notes. There's a lot of things that people have to do to educate themselves, other than just sit back and let somebody spew information. And it's important that you invest in that. And those people that I've seen that do invest in teaching themselves, they're very motivated. They're the ones that will continue on and eventually become really, really good photographers.
And practice, like we were just saying, practice, because you don't really, you say, okay, I understand, but until you actually are doing it, you don't really get it,
That's right. And I guess back to that thing before, we were talking about practice shooting. Well, the same thing is in post-processing. When you get into post-processing, practice and practice and practice. And that's one of the things I like about Lightroom is you've got virtual copies. Make a virtual copy and play with it all you want. It's not going to mess up the real one that you got over here. And then make another virtual copy and play with it more. And the more that you play with these things, the more you're going to learn. So yeah, it is a self-teaching motivation kind of thing that's really going to drive your photography to be better.
All right, so where can our audience find out more about Bart Baldwin?
Okay, right now I'm revamping my personal webpage, bartbaldwin.com. So hopefully soon I'll have that up and going, and it'll have links to my different various things that I have going on. As far as photography is concerned, you can go to bartbaldwinphotography.com or bdvisart.com. They'll all land on my commercial page, and then from there there's links for my workshops and that sort of thing.
And when's the next workshop?
The next workshop is going to be, let me think of the dates. It's the end of March. Yeah, it's going to be towards the end of March, and it's going to be in Charleston. And we do have a few spots.
March 2019?
Yes. And
how many?
Sorry. That's all right.
How many days, or is it one day?
It's a 4-day workshop, Thursday to Sunday. We spend it around Charleston. We're in Charleston. We also go out to some of the really nice plantation homes out in the area and take some photographs. One of them's got a bird sanctuary, so we spend some time doing that. So it's really it's nature and urban, because we do spend some time walking around Charleston and taking some photographs of historic Charleston.
It's so beautiful there. That's awesome.
All right. That's the time of the year that the azaleas are in bloom. So
I love azaleas.
Workshop.
See, down here we have something that is just as beautiful, but I hate them. They're called bougainvillea.
Yeah.
And they're evil. I had them in my yard when I first moved here, and I was like, oh, I love these, until you have blood all over you from the thorns, because they shoot the stalk out, and they just come and get you, and your shoes are all ruined. I hate them. So azaleas are gorgeous without all the blood. And we can't grow them down here. So, well, thank you so much for being on the Understand Photography show, Bart.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
And we will link everything in our show notes, which is understandphotography.com. Well, thank you, Bart, for that interview. That was interesting. And of course, I know a lot of this sounds like we repeat the same things, but a lot of photography education is just practicing and looking at things in a different way, and you'll become a better photographer. Remember, our show notes will be at understandphotography.com, so that you can get a little checklist of what we talked about. It's kind of a nice way to watch the video. The video is on the same page, by the way, so you can watch the video with the show notes right there. I'm Peggy Farren. Thank you so much for watching the Understand Photography show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.